Hi, and welcome back to ConTinual. It is our favorite season of the year, and we are here to talk about the one, the only, the incorrigible, the sometimes digging up their own graves, our patriarchy, Dracula. So I'm joined by a lot of the lost boys and girls of various nether regions. We're not sure what clans of vampires they might be from, but I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. So, Jack, you're up first.
Hi, I'm Jack, not a sparkly vampire, Cullen. My father called me when that movies came out, wanted to know why I kept seeing bumper stickers that said "Drive like a Cullen." I couldn't explain to him. I write science fiction series called Locke Ferguson versus the Aliens, and I write an urban fantasy series called Recollections of a Runite. I can be found at Jack Cullen Books in the various social media sites, and my website is jackcullenwrites.com.
John?
Hey, I'm John L. French. I'm a retired crime scene investigator from the Baltimore City Police Department. I did 35 years on the streets. I write crime, horror, pulp, essentially whatever the editor asked me to write. I have been to the medical examiners on countless occasions, and so far, none of the bodies ever got up.
As far as you know.
As far as I know.
Jamie?
I'm Jamie Garner. I'm a professional author and editor. I write as J.B. Garner and Amelia Quantrill. I write all manner of genre fiction, currently superheroes, epic fantasy, that kind of thing. That's me.
Clay?
I'm Clay Griffith. I write primarily as Clay and Susan Griffith with my wife, Susan. And we are probably best known for the Vampire Empire series, which is why I'm here tonight.
Jenny?
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for dog books. I also write under a variety of other pen names and in all lengths and genres. And I have, since I was young, admitted to being a cross between a vampire and a werewolf. I'm from the old clans.
Lee?
Hi, I'm Lee Martindale. I sling short fiction as a writer and editor. I am an anthologist, a nanopress publisher, and a bard by the old tradition. I write primarily fantasy, humorous fantasy, science fiction, bardcraft, and the occasional horror when I'm feeling peckish.
And Count Orlok's lesser cousin.
Count Gregor. I'm taking over for Greg Uchrin tonight, and I am more primarily an artist. I've done political cartoons in the past. I've been doing some work for Josh Palmatier and Zombie Needs Brains, and just for the fun of it, I started doing a drawing of Dracula's daughter in the manner of Edward Gorey. I will have to show that sometime.
Ooh.
So I want to start with the question that we all know is coming. And Jack, I'm going to start with you on this. And no, your favorite Edward Cullen cannot be your answer in this. And going back to the notion of your question, as far as I know, vampires do not sparkle, including in the scene at which I wrote as they were throwing a vampire through a portal out of a cliff so he would catch on fire on the way down. They catch him at the top, put him out, and then roll him out. They finally rolled him in phosphorus before they threw him out into the sunlight. He did sparkle then before he exploded. So, Jack, what is your least favorite, the worst interpretation of the one and only Dracula for you?
All right. First off, bunch of name stealers. They're not Cullens. Second of all, I got to go with Dracula 2000. It was a mess. Absolute mess.
That's it? That's all you got?
Well, I mean, has anyone here not seen it?
Oh, I
Okay.
avoided it. I know all about it, but I avoided it.
Okay. So those who've seen it, who's liked it? You're a liar, sir.
You're outraged.
it had so much potential, and then they wadded all the potential up and threw it in a trash barrel and said, "Hold my beer." It was bad from beginning to end. The writing was bad, the acting was bad. It wasn't good.
And let's be honest, that beer was a Schlitz.
Yes,
So, John, what is your least favorite Dracula?
Dracula, Dead and Loving It.
Blasphemy.
That's my husband's favorite.
I'm sorry.
That one I like.
Basically, it was based on a movie. It was a parody of a movie that, to be honest, I didn't enjoy that too much. But the parody just shoved in the steak and cut off the head.
And that steak was served overcooked. We know. So, Jamie, how about you? What is that least favorite Dracula of yours?
Let me make sure I get the name. Maybe we should get the right bad Dracula movie. But Dracula Untold. Why Universal in general thought that they could try to marvelize the Universal movie monsters in any way, I don't know. Someone was really having some issues. But the point is that it was just bad. It was just bad. It was trying to tell a story that didn't need to be told, and trying to action hero superheroize a classic movie monster, which you can do, but you can't do it when you're trying to also tell a horror tale. So I don't know. It's too much mixed tonality. It just bad. Do not like.
All right, Clay, who is it for you?
I don't know. I was sitting here trying to think of my least favorite Dracula, and actually, it's not that I like all of them, and can't say I've seen all of them, but there's something about, if it's a legit attempt to do Dracula, there's something in it that I kind of like almost every time. Sometimes the movie can be boring. I actually like Dracula Untold a lot. About 20 minutes too long, and they did the same scene about 5 times, but that's neither here nor there.
They said it was untold, so they kept trying to get it right.
Telling it over.
It should have stayed untold.
I don't know. I really don't have a least favorite Dracula. There's something in all of them that kind of appeal to me in a weird way.
Well, you're no fun. You're not willing to stake that. You're not willing to put that stake in the heart.
No.
All right, Jenny. I know you're going to have a list of these. So
I'm going to say Clay has clearly never seen Dracula 3000.
No, I haven't.
Oh, let me tell you, you're not going to find anything to love.
All right, we'll see.
Awful. It is awful. It actually has a great premise. A ship in the year 3000 is flying around doing salvage, and they find this ship, the Demeter.
In space. Let's not forget that. It's in space.
It is in space. Yes, it's in space, right? In space, no one can hear you snore. So they find, thank you, ladies, for laughing at that. They find the Demeter and they board it. Oh, salvage, right? They connect it to the ship. Oh, and the captain's name is Van Helsing.
Of course.
I will give this movie some credit. It does manage a couple twists you don't see coming. Well, let me put it this way. You didn't see them coming when it released. You'll see them coming now, okay, because this is an older movie. But it's just awful. I mean, Casper Van Dien is the star. And
oh, God.
Yes, right? That already tells you everything you need to know, okay? It's going to be awful. And he's going to try his hardest, and he's just not going to be very good. The two people who managed to survive and save the world by not surviving are not who you expect originally. So, yay, it's just awful. I watched it thinking, someone paid these people money. Somebody wrote this, and somebody somewhere thought this was going to be successful. It's just truly bad all the way around. Their Dracula is so unforgettable that I literally have to look him up, and I'm not going to look right now because the actor does so nothing with the job that I'm sure he was good in other things. It wouldn't be hard, but the actor is so unmemorable that you can't even remember Dracula in it. So, Clay, I challenge you. Watch Dracula 3000 and join me in the hate.
Okay, I'll let you know.
All right, Lee.
Well, first of all, I want to take
Umbrage?
critiquing lessons from Ginny. That is the most meowy critique I've ever heard, and absolutely correct.
Thank you.
It's
I
on my
feel
list.
wrong.
It's on my list as well. I lasted all of 20 minutes.
I watched the whole thing, girl. The whole thing.
I saw it in a theater and made it through the whole thing.
Dear goddess. No, I concur with everything she said. It was one of those, there is absolutely nothing else on, and I can't go to bed yet because I'm waiting for time for meds. And dear God, what am I watching? It was
The paint's already dry.
Oh, honey. It was bad for everything she said and worse. I mean, the Van Helsing character, he was the only part I didn't like in Starship Troopers. So yeah. I concur with ribbons on.
There's an idea. Replace all the bugs from Starship Troopers with bad Draculas.
And you get
I
Dracula
like Starship
3000.
Troopers.
All right, Greg.
Those are better. Let's just-
Okay, well, first of all, I don't like any of the series type movies or television shows that have to throw in Dracula at the end so that he can get beat up by the great vampire Buffy or Blade or whatever. But my favorite worst is Van Helsing with Gerard Butler as Van Helsing and Richard Roxburgh as Dracula with an Australian accent.
Yes.
And the movie is just an absolute mess. It does not know what it's doing. And it's got the worst CG because it was so early in the CG area. So I'm sure a few of you have forgotten it deliberately.
No.
We saw
Excellent.
we
excellent
saw
choice.
an anniversary and it gave me a migraine. That lasted 3 days. It was my second word. So
Had you not
it-
mentioned it, this is the one I was going to bring up to watch everybody groan.
It was truly awful, but I did like the exploding vampire babies.
Oh,
In other words, vampires to go. It's a vampire in a sack. So let's flip this on its head, right? This is the question y'all all assumed I'd start with, which is, who's your favorite, John?
Louis Jourdan in Count Dracula 1977. I watched it on PBS with my father. So it was a very good, and from what I remember, a very faithful retelling of the story of Dracula. And Louis Jourdan he was Dracula. And I mean, yeah, giving nods to all the other ones. If I had to pick somebody, which I do, I would pick Louis Jourdan.
All right, Jamie?
We are gonna have to, because if we do not wrap, we are gonna be in trouble. I have to go with Christopher Lee in all of the Hammer Dracula movies. I rewatched a couple in preparation for this because I hadn't watched them in a while, and Christopher Lee does a pretty amazing Dracula. Just not gonna lie.
You've got to give your love to Christopher Lee.
Mhm.
All right, Clay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with Christopher Lee, and specifically the first one, Horror of Dracula. I think is probably my favorite single Dracula movie. Peter Cushing in it as well, which always is value added for anything. It looks good and it sounds good, and some of the later Draculas don't thrill me quite as much. Lee's always great. He does what he can. But Horror of Dracula is just fantastic.
Jenny?
I remember being in the theater, sitting next to my mother, and we both practically swooned for Frank Langella's Dracula. That is the first time I realized that the bad demon guy could be the sexiest thing you've ever seen in your life. Louis Jourdan is one of the ones that comes in second because they're just so charming. But for me, Frank Langella, I can remember being transfixed and looking over and realizing my mother is Anne's transfixed. And she looks over to me and I'm like, can I be a bride of Frankenstein? And she's like, me too. Right. So yeah, Frank Langella could have got me to do anything. So that was, and it was a faithful adaptation. It's a fabulous movie, and he was stunningly great.
The thing I liked about it was the very end on board the ship after they killed. Yeah, it's a spoiler. Dracula dies at the end. After they kill Dracula, his cloak flies up in the air and takes the form of some kind of bird, as if what was left of Dracula's soul is just departing.
My favorite part of it was Donald Pleasance, who was always eating something. And he did that deliberately so that the camera had to stay on him.
Yes. And laudanum for my own daughter. He delivered that line so well.
All right, Lee, who's your top Dracula?
Ginny and I were apparently separated at birth. Frank Langella.
Excellent taste, Lee. That's all. Excellent taste.
Frank Langella did it for me. I discovered hormones I didn't even know I had.
Right?
And I liked the approach he took to the character because yes, he was mean and nasty and all sorts of things, but he was also alone. And you saw that in much of his portrayal. There was a sadness to it that wasn't broody. He had sex appeal, he knew it, and he used it. And I loved the actor. I loved the way they played the character. He's on my list at the top.
All right, Greg, who's your favorite?
Well, Bela Lugosi, of course, but I had a correction from the Peanut Gallery. Hugh Jackman played Van Helsing in Van Helsing. I love Langella as Dracula, but Larry Olivier really ruined the movie for me.
Yeah.
Christopher Lee is a very strong Dracula, very strong. He's my second favorite, but Bela Lugosi is, well, he created the role. He sounds like Dracula. He's got a complex character. He has a sense of humor. He has a sense of tragedy. To die, to be really dead, that must be glorious. There are far worse things awaiting man than death. Beautiful.
All right, Jack, who's your favorite?
I got to go with Bela Lugosi. The very first Dracula I've ever saw, watching Creature Double Feature in my parents' basement. He was the only Dracula I ever saw for a good chunk of my childhood. I mean, he went up against Abbott Costello. Come on, that's awesome. He epitome. He was Dracula as far as I was concerned, and every other Dracula I ever watched had to come up to his level to be any good for me. And a lot of the names you guys threw out hit that level, but he'll always be number one for me.
Gee, nobody's going for the Gary Oldman. I don't know.
Oh, he was great, but you asked who our favorites were.
I did not like the costume design in that. It looked like it was made for a manga or an anime or something. It was like
Nothing about that movie appealed to me.
There's a
I like
ton
that
of, like,
movie.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you. I thought he did a great job as Dracula. I didn't like the armor, and I can't think of the actor. Bill and Ted, Excellent Adventure.
Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, thank you.
Keanu
Keanu Reeves was killing me in that because he had the long hair and he kept doing the head flip from Bill and Ted's, and it would tear me right out of the movie. But I thought I thought Ullman did a great job.
So I want to talk a little bit about Dracula and the interpretations through time, right? If we go back 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, there were a lot of Dracula films, not just vampire films, true Dracula films, storytelling, everything else. Then we start running into the 80s, 90s, and we go over, we get one every few years, whether we wanted to be subjected to it or not. But then we started being revived, and a lot of it tended to be, some of it was humorous, some of it was, much more of the how do we take it into what take. But so, and Jamie, I'm going to start with you on this one. What is it about Dracula that is timeless, but allows us to slip that character into any time? And is there a particular era of films that works more for you than others?
Well, I mean, the thing about any enduring myth like vampires, which, Dracula is the, your key representative, or example, at least when it comes to pop culture, is, the fact they represent, timeless fears and desires and interests of like the human psyche. And vampires are this, you have this whole, as humans, we question what lies beyond the death, and vampires exist as this thing that is neither, the whole idea of the undead, which is, common in like almost every like culture, on the earth. And so many cultures have vampire stand-ins. You have these things that are cursed, undead, dead, but also not. Vampires also have this whole like aspect of hunger and kind of like zombies, but a way more cultured and classy sort of zombie. Hunger and consumption and seductiveness, especially once you get into like your Dracula, because Dracula's where Dracula, Camilla, stuff like this, where you start to get the whole like, oh, vampires are not just mindless monsters or like just pure evil. There's an edge. There's something else to them. And I think that just sort of thing, this is timeless human emotions and mythology, and I don't think they're ever going to go away. And Dracula, because we always remember our first. As Dracula is the first, the big example. It's why Dracula is so enduring. As for what era of films, I mean, I think actually a lot of modern stuff is starting to get interesting again. Of course, I'm a sucker for the classic Hammer cycle, that the 50s through like the 60s. I think one interesting one I saw recently was the Netflix BBC collaboration 2020. They did a Dracula miniseries on Netflix, and it's really interesting. And then I also liked Renfield. So like modern stuff's starting to get interesting again with depicting Dracula, but we'll see if it continues. I don't think it's quite matched the classic era of like Hammer films are like, but we could get there.
Clay, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything just said. And Dracula and vampires in general can cover a wide swath of subject matter. It's a line sort of between savagery and civilization and animalism, the sexuality, power fantasies, all that can come through in Dracula. There's temptation of evil, or temptation, power in the Dracula mythos. Power is evil and evil is power. And so there's a temptation to fall to that side. So, I mean, those are themes that can be done anywhere, except apparently on a spaceship in the year 3000. That can't be done then. But other than that, they can adapt to Victorian times, which he came from. They can be, hippie San Francisco as Count Yorga, which was really Dracula in a different name, and Blackula, which is actually a terrific movie. The first Blackula is great. You can do a lot of different things. And I mean, my favorite, even though I'm a Christopher Lee guy, I think I have to go back to the original Universal, because the aesthetic of the Universal pictures is very comforting to me. You know, I grew up watching them, you know, in the late night creature features, and there's something warm about the stark black and white and the castles and the fog and the burgermeisters and the peasants and torches, and that's my comfort zone, and I fall into it very easily.
Jenny?
Okay, well, I'm going to start by saying I think the very worst decade was the 2000s. I've just looked at the list again, and there's like nothing good on there. They're all terrible as far as I am concerned.
All three of them.
Huh?
All three of them.
No, there's a lot of Draculas in the 2000s, actually, and they're gross. But one of the things that, see, my dog agrees. One of the ones that there's only like 3 movies in the 80s, and 2 of them are like completely unremarkable, but Monster Squad is actually great. And Duncan Regeer is a fabulous Dracula. He is probably, honestly, my second favorite Dracula. Because not only is he's very handsome, he's very erudite, he's very in control, and he's ruthless and cold. And we have a tendency to make Dracula, and I mean, Frank Langella is the kind of the opposite of this. Okay, his was as they go warm. Frank Langella is really looking for an unlife mate. Duncan Regeer is not looking for that. His Dracula is not looking for that. The humanized monster is Frankenstein's monster, is who helps save the kids in Monster Squad. But I feel like once we go that I mean, like, were the 90s any good? No, I hated the 90s. I hated the 2000s. I mean, other than Renfield, which I really enjoyed, I don't think I've liked a Batman. Sorry, not a Batman. I just saw Batman versus Dracula. I'm like, yeah, no. I don't think I've liked a Dracula since Monster Squad. I think most of them. Renfield I loved because, you know, it's Nicolas Cage and he's completely freaking over the top. The color scheme is total pop. I mean, it's very, very intensely extra. The whole thing is extra. And I really liked that because I feel like Nicolas Cage got the over the topness of what Dracula could be if you really get him into modern age. That he's terrifying, right? But in this really wackadoodle way. But Duncan Regeer's Monster Squad was really, really good, and I thought it was a very good depiction. And honestly, like I said, other than I just like the older stuff from the 1980s, 1989 back is much better than 1990 forward.
Back to the Future Dracula.
Exactly.
All right, Lee.
Archetypes have staying power, let's face it. And Dracula is an archetype. It's death without the death. It's power and sexuality and all of the things that get brought into. Well, okay, how many times have they made movies that could have been Dracula? There's something about that character and that character in a story. You know, that is pride of place, and that's who that character is. He carries all of the wants, needs, desires of humanity without being human. Does a good imitation of it. And I think when they started making sympathetic Draculas, some of them worked, most of them didn't. But when you go back to the okay, if you go back to the very beginning of European vampire, what came out of the ground was Nosferatu.
Hmm.
And you'd be hard pressed to believe that character was ever human. When you start adding some hair, some good looks, good cheekbones, this sort of thing, and someone who's trading on the looks to mesmerize his victims, you've got a character with staying power. And I don't know any writer of my acquaintance who hasn't taken a shot at writing that character before. I made mine female, but it worked. But it's just a case of there are certain archetypes that we're going to use until the death of the sun, and he's one of them.
All right, Greg.
Well, Lee was bringing up some interesting points. I was thinking of Dracula in terms of like a Jungian perspective. He is the conjunction of Eros, the sexual principle, and what Jung called Adler, the power principle. He is both of those. The sex drives his power. The power drives the sex. And also, he is, in a sense, tragic because he was once human, and now he's trying to pass as human. So he is basically coding himself as human in order to further his goals, which is staying alive.
I'm muting Jenny. Don't worry about it. Just Jack, what is it for you?
You cut off the front there. Were you talking to me?
Yeah, I was talking to you, Jack.
Oh, sorry.
I'm talking
I didn't
to
hear
you.
the
I'm talking
Jack
to you.
part. I didn't hear it. Okay. Well, to continue this deep philosophical discussion of it, I gotta say nobody rocks an opera cape like Dracula.
Yes, he's got the clothes. Yes.
So I kind of like seeing him in a time period where he can pull it off without looking like an idiot. The exception being Renfield. Renfield was freaking awesome. Nick Cage was completely out of the box, over the top, nuts, and he made it work. You know, what is it? A handful of nuns and a bus full of cheerleaders. I like to see him in the Victorian era, or the Universal Studios. Yeah, that made it work because it was the black and white. You still the spooky castle, and he kind of fit in there. Yeah, he is a tragic figure, right? He's trying to recover his lost love. I generally like my bad guys to be bad guys. This works for Dracula because it's all these horrible things. He's eking out this existence where he's got to drink blood to survive. He's undead. He's got to live in a coffin. He's trying to stalk this woman that reminds him of his past love. But yet there's an allure of power where you have people who still think he's cool. That's difficult to pull off. And yet, because of the character itself, it's been successful in so many different movies where other attempts of it haven't worked.
John?
I think I like going back to Nosferatu and into the Christopher Lee era. I like those movies better because they are still trying to define what Dracula is or who Dracula is. I mean, Max Schreck played Count Orlok, and let's be honest, it's Dracula by another name. As a predator. I mean, he wasn't interested in anything but his next meal, and it was just pure horror. And I think the remake they did many years later just came close, but the ending did not do it justice. And then Christopher Lee was exploring other aspects of Dracula. And these are the movies that define for us who Dracula is, what Dracula was, and even to the point like sunlight didn't hurt Dracula until the ending of Nosferatu. There were other vampire tropes that everybody knows what you can do with how to protect yourself from a vampire, but there were very few of them in the original novel. I mean, the original novel, Count Dracula could walk around in the daylight. He was not as powerful, but he could walk around in the daylight. And there was nothing, so daylight didn't hurt him until they decided, yes, it does hurt him. I think, and anything that comes after that really has to deal with everybody's preconceptions. And unless they handle it very well, or they handle it comedically, like George Hamilton in Love at First Sight, which basically made fun of all the trope. I think the heyday of vampires died with no pun intended, died with Christopher Lee and later John Carradine, who played a completely different kind of vampire.
See, you could have gone and said ran dry, but we'll go with that. So Clay, one of the big things that when we look at any hero or villain is the foil that we see them put against, right? And so we're all used to that notion of Van Helsing. But I think that's one of those things that we've also seen a lot of different interpretations of Van Helsing to mirror the strengths, the weaknesses of the Dracula he's against. So which Van Helsing do you think was the better Van Helsing? Who's your strongest Van Helsing, and what is it about him and the relationship to his Dracula?
Oh, well, I mentioned him before, actually. Peter Cushing in Horror of Dracula is my favorite Van Helsing. There's something confident about him. He knows he's up against great odds, including people who don't necessarily believe what he believes. But the thing that I really like about that particular movie and that version of Van Helsing is he's a little, as Cushing can often be, he's a little distant and sort of upper class, gentlemanly. There's a great scene though when they're after Lucy in the graveyard and she's been taking this little girl to drink her blood, and they interrupt her with the cross to the forehead and all that. And before they go to get Lucy, Peter Cushing's Van Helsing goes over to the little girl and puts his big coat around her and says, "Oh, there, now you'll be warm. Oh, look, you look just like a teddy bear now." And it's a sweet little moment in a movie that doesn't have any sweet moments otherwise. And it's nice. It's a really nice little moment. Plus, he does that cool candlestick thing at the end where he cross, which is brilliant. Kind of stupid, but brilliant. So Peter Cushing, it's hard to beat him.
Jenny?
I would say my least favorite character in all the Dracula stuff is Van Helsing. I don't like, he's almost been fetishized into the guy, right? When he's not the only person fighting and everything else. So I tend to dislike Van Helsing's a lot, or feel like we could have done this without a Van Helsing character. So realistically, my favorite would be Laurence Olivier in Frank Langella's Dracula. I think it was Greg who said, or Greg or Clay didn't like him, but at least it was Laurence Olivier. I just did Van Helsing really, and I'm going to blame the Van Helsing Hugh Jackman movie probably for this more than I'm just like, could we just do it without a Van Helsing character ever? could be managed. I don't know. I feel like Van Helsing is, well, I don't feel like Dracula's trite. I feel like Van Helsing, by his overuse, has become trite. So not my favorite by any means. So, Lawrence, over to you.
All right, Lee.
My favorite Van Helsing is Anthony Hopkins. Bram Stoker's Dracula. One, I like Hopkins. I thought he was, in terms of the power of performance, he was on a par with, he was well matched with Gary Oldman. And I just like that every so often you wondered if this man was playing with a full deck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. But there was power and knowledge and commitment to Hopkins that he brought to Van Helsing that I thought that was the equal. It needed to be well balanced between Van Helsing and Dracula, and that's one of the few where I thought it really was.
Greg?
Well, I loved Peter Cushing. He was absolutely fantastic, and he is my favorite Van Helsing. But he's had the advantage of having more movies to his credit than the original Van Helsing, Edward Van Sloan. And what you get with the Peter Cushing version, you get a physical Van Helsing. He gets to do this thing with the cross, with the candles. But with Edward Van Sloan, you have this mental, psychic battle with Dracula in the confrontation scene. And you can feel Dracula pulling him towards him, and you can feel the effort that Van Sloan uses to get away. And that scene has never been equaled. Never.
Jack?
I have to go with Lee's answer. Anthony Hopkins was the best as far as I'm concerned. I've always liked it when Van Helsing's more in an advisory role rather than more of a lead. And he's just a phenomenal actor. But he gave a sinister edge to it's like, I don't know if we trust the guy we need to trust to take care of this problem. And he had a gleam of fanaticism when he was doing it. Like he would sacrifice anybody to make sure the vampire's dead. And it really upped the game in that movie because, yeah, you've got evil, but it's like, we got a sliding scale here. Do we need to trust this guy to get this done? And not a lot of people could have pulled that off. And it was great. So, yeah, he's my favorite.
Yeah, if there'd only been a little Chianti and fava beans. John, how about you?
Okay, I'm going to go with Peter Cushing. The way he played Van Helsing, you got the feeling that if everything went bad and Peter Cushing was actually turned into a vampire, he'd be the alpha vampire. I mean, that's how much energy and all that he had. You know, turning Van Helsing into a vampire would have been the worst mistake Dracula could have made. You know,
Dracula, where he is bitten.
Yeah, well, that's when he takes the poker,
and
burns it out of his, basically cauterizes the wound.
So now all of us writers are now planning that for our next book. Van Helsing into a vampire.
I've
copyrighted it already.
I won't discuss it because it wasn't Dracula vampire, but I've written vampire scenes where my wife read it and she said, "You're going to hell for that." But basically thinking a little outside the box. No, but then no pun intended. But
a little outside the bang.
Yeah, but
You like have a
I-
list of puns you're just waiting to use.
He does. You know he does.
does.
It's written down.
Sorry, John, I didn't interrupt.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm going with Peter Cushing.
All right, Jamie.
All right, I get to go outside the box. So I mentioned the Dracula 2020, the Netflix BBC collaboration series, and their Van Helsing. Up until I saw it, which is like actually like 2 days ago, I would have gone with Peter Cushing too. But so in this miniseries, we have Sister Agatha Van Helsing, a nun, a skeptical academic nun who winds up involved in all of this, and she is a fantastic Van Helsing because not only because the actress herself just has a very powerful, crisp presence, but she does an excellent job of being like. So they don't know. She treats every legend about the vampires as it could be accurate, it could not be, because she's a nun that's lost her faith. So everything's up for grabs. So she brings some of that classic scientific aspect to Van Helsing from the original novels and stuff. Like, this is experimentation. We don't know. And it's very interesting because she refines her faith in God through Dracula. Because seeing not only the supernatural, that's the devil, and then the fact that, the cross that like faith in good actually repels this thing, helps rekindle her faith. And she has some of that because she has that same sort of like spiritual, like intellectual bit that like Greg was talking about, where she can't physically confront Dracula because it's Dracula. And she's, a little nun. So you don't have I appreciate Cushing's physicality. It's nice to have that purely academic, spiritual, intellectual back and forth. Because she's very intellectual, and Dracula, well, suave and all this stuff, is also animalistic because of his bloodlust. They play with that back and forth balance. Animal cunning versus, pure intellectualism. She's really great in it. She's so good that when the character seems to die, they find a way to bring her back anyway because she's that good. They couldn't get the series to conclude without her. So
that third act that was so good, and then they hit that third act, and
yes,
she outshone the actor that was Dracula though. The actress was so head and shoulders above him.
Yes,
she was just really good. But yeah, that third act,
yeah,
it was like they just phoned the third part in.
100% agree. If you stop it at the end of the second episode, you need to watch the third one.
No, since it's still out there or somewhere. I don't want to give away the third
twist,
act,
yeah.
but
Sure.
When I found out, when Dracula came out of the water and I found out what was going on, I said, "Nah, I'm going to stop it too."
Good move.
Wasn't a bad move.
Yes, smart move.
So Jenny, I want to throw this up in the air to you as well. So, and I'm afraid to ask this question. When we look, because we've hinted at a lot of the different takes on Dracula, we've hinted a lot of the things that make up Dracula. We've gone through and we've talked about it. What Dracula trope is it that drives you nuts? And I'll sip the tea now while she has
No. I'm trying to word this so that people who see this don't decide to shun me forever. I really hate the sexy vampire trope of all those vampires are just looking for a love and a life mate. And all Dracula wants is one chick to lie next to him in his coffin for the rest of his unlife. One of the things that bothers me with everything in the undead, everything with all the monsters, every monster comes out of religion. And we shoved religion away. And the sexy vampires, wow, they're just looking for the right person, boy or girl, to suck blood from. And that's not, to me, what a vampire is. It's an aspect of a vampire. But it really bothers me that the trope of, they're just looking for love like the rest of us. Because it's fun once in a while, but it's such a huge thing, in a literary way that, I mean, and no hatred for anybody who loves them or for anybody who writes them, because it's very popular and I get it. Okay. I do get it. But it's a trope that I think I would really like to see less of, because they're not, if you look at Dracula as he was originally created, this is not necessary. This can be looked at as a tragic figure or even a romantic figure, but as, ooh, honey, baby, it has, I don't mind, me and Lee are ready to go off with Frank Langella's version, but at the same time, every vampire should not be a figure of romantic lust on both sides. That's my view. That's been my TED talk. I'll take my hat. Go now.
All right, Lee. What is your least favorite vampire trope?
Crosses, holy water, and other religious trappings. They should not work. They should not work. Excuse me. Allergies. I don't see how they work on something that is without a soul. And something that whose bloodlines predate practically every religion going. If you go back to the traditional tales, they've been around longer than we have, and I don't see how religion works on those. So pulling out two high class butter knives and making a cross with them should not work. Throwing the contents of the baptismal font from the back of the church should not work. And yet they do. If nothing, at worst they buy our hero the time. But just the whole based in religion type thing bothers the heck out of me. I'm toying with the story idea that's set when the old gods were being worshipped, and yeah, there were vampires then too. But just it's too easy to out. It makes it too easy for our heroes in anyone I've ever watched.
All right, Greg, how about you?
Well, I have mentioned in other panels that I hate exploding vampires because if you have one drop of vampire blood in you, you can explode. No. That doesn't work. But the trope that I really have a problem with is the long lost love trope.
Oh.
Now, it was not in the original novel. Stoker only used the name Dracula, not because he was basing it on Vlad Tepes, but because he thought it was a nice name for Count Vampire that he was trying to do. But it started with the Jack Palance movie, I believe, that
Yes,
we have
I saw that last night.
Lost love, and then we go to Gary Oldman, and one critic said the more sympathetic you make Dracula, the less horror he actually inspires. And that is, you have to be very careful and keep Dracula horrifying. And that trope takes it away. It suddenly makes him into a human more than this undead monster. And he's got to have more undead monster who was a human than human who's sort of an undead monster.
Jack?
Well, I gotta say, I like Lee's talk about the old ones. The power of Cthulhu repels you.
You gotta have
Popped
faith.
in my head as soon as
You
she
gotta
said
have
that.
faith.
That's
Have
right.
faith.
I gotta say it's the wooden stakes, right? Because I mean that came out from the movies. If you go back far enough, it was you nail them in the coffin with metal stakes to chop the head off, right? If you go back far enough. The wooden stakes came about because, it was something easy in the movies. But it is not easy to stick somebody with a wooden stake. That is not going to work well in a fight with a human. Forget a vampire. So that's always annoyed me. With one exception, the author Ari Carr has this whole thing where vampires have an allergy to cellulite. So the wood actually affects them almost like a poison. It was an interesting take that I liked. But for the most part, yeah, wooden stake, it's like, oh, please, come on. He's super strong. You don't think he can snap that in a heartbeat? It just, I don't know, just too Hollywood for me.
And also, wouldn't a stake through the heart just kill everybody? I mean, it doesn't.
Yeah.
If you can get through the storm.
Now, an iron spike holds him in the coffin.
Mhm.
And
Right.
he allows him to stay alive while he is in that coffin. And he gets a real feel of, I want to take revenge on the person who trapped me here.
The old torpor. All right, John, what's your least favorite trope?
Okay, I think it would have to be the fact that only the Christian religion has power over these vampires. I can understand where it comes from because these were, they were dealing mainly in European vampires, and there is a there's a whole good versus evil thing. I've always thought it would be that it is the belief, the belief plays a big role in it. It is the belief of the user, the one fighting the vampire, and whatever this person holds sacred is what they can use to defend against the vampire. And the vampire does not understand the power of whatever this is, and therefore cannot fight against it. The other variation I've heard is that vampires are afraid of holy water and of crosses and all that because these are relatively new vampires and they believe they should be. A friend of mine once wrote a zombie story in which the zombies in this town were going after people's brains. And the hero goes, wait a minute. Why are you going after people's brains? And stop. Don't know. It's just what zombies did. And he convinces them they don't have to do it. So I think the whole thing of, and at least when you're dealing with the more modern vampires, they're afraid of crosses. They're afraid of holy water simply because that's what they expected. Now, a great variation of this, and I'm not saying it was a really good vampire movie, but The Fearless Vampire Hunters, or pardon me, but your teeth are in my neck, had a thing where a Jewish man gets turned into a vampire. And he does the whole and he does the whole bat thing, turning into a bat and flying into the maiden's, bedroom. And she holds up a cross and he looks at her and says, honey, have you got the wrong vampire? Because it wasn't, to him, a cross is just two pieces of wood. So that's, that and the idea that I can see resting in a nice, comfortable coffin at night, but it has to be soil from your home, from your homeland. There was a DC comic, I think it was called Vamps, and they're just, the female vampires are just digging themselves a hole in the ground. They said, wait a minute, don't you have to rest in your native soil? We're American vampires. It's all our native soil.
Yep.
Jamie, how about you? What's your least favorite trope?
There's a ton of the ones that have already been brought up that are among my different levels of love with. I definitely agree when the whole religious thing. I think it's Great One represented as a power of faith, not a power of religion, because I can see that. However, I think the one I'm going to bring up, it doesn't happen that often, but it happens more as we get into modern times. The scientification of vampires. I think I see this more in literature than I see it in movies, but I definitely see it where it's like if you create a scientific rationale for a blood sucking undead monster, you take, as with many things, and you add too much science to it, you take the punch out of it. It's like we were talking about, if you make Dracula human, it's not horrific anymore. If you make it too scientific, it's horrific. Like, I mean, if you even look at science fiction horror like Alien, the fact you don't know all that much in the sci-fi setting about the alien is why it's horrific. So you do this, so you do it with vampires or any other supernatural monster. But vampires get it a lot because blood, okay, it could be a blood disease and turns into one of those like it's easier to try to make it scientific than with some other more extensive, more like greater, like werewolves and stuff. It's harder. I don't like that because like you take the punch, you take the horror out of it. You just turn into a weird mutant or like sci-fi movie, and
you lose the mystique.
I want the supernaturalness. Yeah, the mystique. Yeah, good word for it.
Play.
Well, there's a trope actually I used to really love. I mean, everyone did. It was standard, sort of like capes. I mean, that's how you could just tell a vampire walking down the street he had a cape on. But Dracula used to turn into a bat. I mean, remember that? He always turned into a bat. That was just something he did, but that went away because it's, patently stupid for a human being to turn into a little bat. But I don't hate it. I actually kind of miss it. I know you can't do it anymore because it just looks goofy, but the guy used to turn into a bat. It was really cool. He'd turn into a bat. He'd come into your bedroom. He'd have his cape up. It's just what the guy did. And they took that part of his resume away. It's kind of sad.
That was part of the thing I kept looking forward to if I ever became a member of the Undead, was the ability to become a bat and fly around.
Yeah, who wouldn't?
It's definitely easier than dealing with TSA. Yeah, Lee.
Yeah, he was asking who wouldn't. I don't want to be a bat.
How about a wolf? He could turn into a wolf too.
Okay, now you're on.
That part was cool.
Yeah.
I know the scientification of vampires, others people, but as a scientist, it always bothered me. Like, well, when he turns into a bat, where does the rest of the mask go? And when he turns back into a vampire, where does he get this mask?
Well, you
have to go with Montague. You have to go with Montague Summers here. The vampire is a pomp of the devil. When he's out in real life, walking around, he isn't really there. He's still in the coffin.
Mm.
Oh, okay.
So if he's not really there, he's not really there, and you shove a stake through his heart,
you can't do that while
you can't kill him
while he's walking around.
Yeah, it does have to be in the coffin.
Difficult.
Yeah.
That's what we all need, is a little walking around blood. So, Lee, there's always a ton of stuff we don't get a chance to hit on in these because, again, we could geek out on this for hours and hours. So what's one thing we have not touched on Dracula that you think we need to mention?
The fact that under everything else, he was full goose crazy. As reference, I'm going to give you William Dafoe playing Max Schreck, playing Count Orlok in Shadow of the Vampire. It came out in 2000. You never quite know whether is this guy named Max Schreck really Dracula, or is he crazy? He does crazy real well. And it was with the original movie that came out in the 20s or 20s, I think.
It was 20. It was 27, maybe.
Yeah, something like that. There were rumors that Max Schreck was in fact a vampire. He was so convincing in the part. And William Dafoe takes that and runs with it. But the fact that underneath the suave, the sexy, whatever you got, what he is crazy. Part of the turning process, I think, is instilling second level madness, and you don't see that very often. This is one reason why I so love the William Dafoe part as Max Schreck, because he nailed it.
All right, Greg.
Well, going along those lines, you have to look at Renfield. When Renfield goes to the psychologist, the group therapy session, and they say, "You're not really sick. He's the obsessive." And yeah, Dracula is kind of crazy, isn't he? But
You got to remember the old defenses against the vampire. Throw rice on the floor. Got to count it all.
right, he is not a natural creature, so you cannot judge him by the same standards that you judge a human being. He has a totally different set of morals, set of goals, set of ethics. He's evil, but as far as we're concerned, as far as he's concerned, he's just doing what he has to do.
Joys of being an apex predator.
Mm-hmm.
Jack, what have we not hit on?
Well, you just touched on it briefly, the various weaknesses and limitations that he had. You mentioned the rice, having to drop and count the rice. There's having to be welcomed into a home. Speaking of which, my kid's in college right now, has a doormat, come back with a warrant. 4 generations of law enforcement, come back with a warrant. Okay. It's got to keep the vampires out, so I'm okay with it. There's so many different limitations, and some of them can't cross running water. I touched on that. I do have Dracula in one of my series, Recollections of Rune Knight comes in later books, and I basically had it that when he was human, he was, a bag full of crazy. He had all these phobias, and when he transformed, those phobias came with him, and that's why he can't do that, and that's why any vampire he makes can't do that. I always found those limitations kind of helped make Dracula who he was. You get this monster, you get this powerful being, and it's like, yeah, but you can't do this. I'm on holy ground. It's limiting, so it kind of saves the heroes a little bit, but he always seems a way to get around, and I always thought that was kind of cool.
John, what have we not touched on?
Why the hell do people hunt vampires at? That's always been my question. I mean, I know it's more dramatic that way, but it's sort of like, well, we've tracked him to his lair. Let's go get him. Let's wait for the sun to rise.
Burn the house down.
It gives us about 8 to 12 hours to do whatever we have to do. Let's just, anybody bring the flamethrower. That sort of stuff.
Anybody got thermite?
But that's, there are tropes you like and tropes you don't. I think each vampire is different, and that's about it.
All right, Jamie, what have we not touched on?
I think just to recognize, though I do really see the whole hunt vampires and how he's stupid. If there's one thing about some of the flaws of like the Jack Palance led Dracula, there were flaws in it, but they very much held the whole regard of like, they were really trying to do everything during the day, and just, it was by bad luck they would sometimes get caught at night, but it's always very good, like, they use the sun as a ticking clock very well, which a lot of vampire movies forget to do. That really vampire fiction started with The Vampire by like Polidori. Like, and Dracula's not even like is like fifth, sixth, like of like to go into the vampire literature trend. So we must bow to the progenitors as much as we bow to Dracula.
Play.
Other versions of Dracula that are great, and the one that I'm thinking of, and the one probably most influential for me, Marvel Comics' Tomb of Dracula from the 1970s. Gene Colan, Marv Wolfman, Tom Palmer. When I think like the word Dracula, the image from that comic book is the first thing that pops into my head. I love that version of the character.
Jenny?
He'll have his own movie one day.
Vampires are eternal, and they're going to be eternal. And even though every one of us named a trope we don't like, at one point in time, I'm going to guarantee all of us are going to write that trope and hit it hard, and or write that trope, multiple of those tropes, and hit them hard. But ever so often you hear editors saying, "Oh, we're sick of vampires." They are. The reading and the viewing public are not tired of vampires. The reading public is never going to tire. Vampires, more than any other monster, are eternal. And we're all going to write them at some point in time. We're all going to read them and watch them at some point in time. And we're all going to love and hate them. But ultimately, vampires are as a part of the human psyche as everything else. And we just love those blood-sucking fiends, and we're going to continue to forever.
So, Greg, I'm going to go to you for this last question.
Okay.
What's your favorite vampire film that's not a Dracula movie?
Oh. I'm going to go with Shadow of the Vampire with the one with
Defoe and yeah.
Huh? Yeah, Defoe, and it was both funny and
Scary
at the same time. Yes. Now the recent crop, Renfield and Abigail, were very good, but nothing's quite come up to Shadow of the Vampire in terms of working the myth as a reality, a strange reality that you could actually capture on film, but a reality, yes.
Jack?
Vampire movie without Dracula.
Yep.
Well, can't say Abbott Costello be Frankenstein because he showed up in that one. I'm going to say The Lost Boys. Yeah, I was living at the beach when that movie came out. That was spooky as hell for me. A little bit of comedy. It went well. I thought it was a really good movie. Yeah, I always liked that one.
If it wasn't for all the damn vampires. John.
Okay. One, it is not a very good vampire, but I still like it. Night of Dark Shadows, which Barnabas Collins is in. I mean, they do the vampire thing. This is not the Dark Shadows soap opera. This is Barnabas Collins as a vampire. And what I like about it is when the vampire experts, or the ones who know more about vampires, anybody, go to the police, the sheriff basically thinks, well, maybe you're right. I mean, we can't afford to we can't afford not to think you're right. So when they do capture, when they do confront Barnabas, he's looking, and they all pull out a crucifix because just in case he was a vampire, they were given crucifix. And he's kind of like, and they start there's a circle around him, and they start closing him in, and that's how they catch him. because I mean, that's like middle of the movie. There's more of that, more to it, but that's how they catch it. For once, the authorities did not discount the fact that this person might be a vampire. So that's why I love this movie, because the police were not a bunch of bumbling idiots.
Jamie?
I am going to have to go with, and it's either, depending upon which version you watch, either Let the Right One In or Let Me In, whether you want to watch the original or the English version, the American remake. I think they're both equally good in different ways, but they're both fantastic. Definitely a very different way in some ways of looking at vampires, and definitely not a Dracula film. Highly recommend.
Play?
The Night Stalker, Darren McGavin.
Wow.
Earl Kolchak's my guy, and he's like Van Helsing in a seersucker suit. And it's just McGavin's great, and the movie's great. So that's it.
And the Straw Hat.
Straw Hat, man.
Jenny?
About two. All the Blade movies and Interview with the Vampire. I think all of them are great and great in different ways. I think the Anne Rice's take on what a vampire really is was really good, very accurate, and I like the take of Blade of the Daywalker of, yeah, I might be one of them, but I'm not one of them. Both of them are really not Dracula movies, they're vampire movies. Even though in the third one, I think they take on, in Blade, they take on Dracula, but we'll ignore that for right now. But Blade and Interview.
That's just setting up so Deadpool and Blade can have a crossover. So, Lee?
The original version of Salem's Lot
Mm.
scared the absolute Jesus out of me.
Mhm.
And it was one of those cases where most of the time our vampire was off screen. It was just beautifully done, atmospheric. I read the book and slept with the light on for about a week, and they did justice with that original movie.
Have you seen the one that just came out?
Not yet.
No,
What'd you think?
No one's seen it yet.
No,
I
I
haven't
don't
seen it.
We haven't seen it yet.
Oh, it's worth watching.
Oh, good.
Okay.
No made.
If I may say something about what Lee said about the Salem's Lot, there is a really powerful scene in the book, and it gets into this whole belief thing where the priest is confronting the vampire, and he's holding a crucifix in front of him, and the vampire basically says, "You placed all your trust in two pieces of wood. If you truly have faith, put it down
Ooh,
and confront."
yes.
And the priest can't. And the vampire, I don't exactly remember what happens, but the vampire, as he's leaving, he tells the priest, "If you'd have down, you'd have beaten."
It's
So
like,
that's basically, again, it's faith and not the it's your faith and not the object you're holding.
that's what happens.
That makes
in
a lot of sense.
Fright Night. Fright Night scared the crap out of me.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
Good movie. Yeah.
Frightened. I know it's supposed to be a comedy. I was screaming through most of it. But one of the
Stop the remake of it.
powerful moments is when, the vampire puts forth the crucifix and our vampire puts in and goes, "Oh no, you have to have faith."
Yeah.
And the crucifix just bursts into flame. And then later on, the win is that after seeing one of the younger characters destroyed, this guy gets his faith and is able to do boom, right? So all of that was really well done. I forgot to mention Fright Night as a really good vampire movie where your vampire is absolutely not a good guy.
Well, before we close this crypt, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys. So, Jack, website, social
well,
media, and of course, what they need to go pick up.
Sure. My books can be found anywhere. Social media, it's Jack Cullen Books. My website's jackcullenwrites.com. Yeah, if my sci-fi's get some humor in it, my urban fantasies get some humor in it. If you like that sort of thing, check me out.
John?
Okay, this is not a recent book. It's been out for a couple of years, but I think it's appropriate. It is Detectives of the Abyss, Murder at Castle Dracula, in which Dr. Jane Watson, daughter of John Watson, goddaughter of Sherlock Holmes, is summoned to Castle Dracula to solve the murder of a vampire.
Jamie?
You can find me pretty much anywhere on in most social medias and things. As JB Garner Writes. My website is jdgarnerwrites.com. You can get all my book stuff there, on Amazon. Recent stuff, the stuff to buy. Ginger Blue Publishing released earlier this year the first book in my superhero series, Indomitable. Also, in the next couple of months, my debut novel is Amelia Quantrill comes out, also released by Ginger Blue. Songs and Sorcery, it's film noir meets romantasy. And that's me.
Clay?
Clay and SusanGriffith.com, and we're both on Facebook and various other places. And yeah, you can find Vampire Empire and Crown and Key wherever fine books are sold.
Jenny?
GiniKoch.com. I'm all over Facebook, X, Twitter, Blue Sky, and Pinterest. My most recent releases are from Ginger Blue Publishing in June, by me writing as A.E. Stanton, the first in a trilogy of novels set in the Old West, Natural Born Outlaws. Coming up later this month in October is a re-release of my humor collection, Random Musings from a Funny Girl, with bonus material. And in November, also coming from Ginger Blue, will be the first in another mystery series from me and my co-writer, B.B. Bayless, Something Wicked, which is the first in our Santa Paloma mysteries.
Lee?
To find out everything you wanted to know and probably didn't want to know, harphaven.net has my bibliography, where you can find my stuff, all sorts of things, and my e-store. I'm on social media on Facebook, and I'm not sure what to call it. It used to have a bird on the cover. I just, go ahead and search me there. You can also find my books by searching for Lee Martindale on the Big River and their major opposition. And they keep letting me hang out here for reasons I don't know. But that's it.
Greg?
You can find my stuff on Facebook at facebook.com/IV caffeine. That is short for intravenous caffeine, which was the name of one of my political cartoons, but I decided that I liked it as a studio name. If you look in the About column, there's a few links to other places where I might be seen. And of course, I will be putting up that Dracula's Daughter Edward Gorey style comic as soon as I get it finished. So there you go.
And you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, creatingpros.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we'll see you guys again soon, assuming that the bats don't come and find me.